Hello, and welcome to our very first Books and Bites for the 2020-2021 school year. I am Miss Pippin, the media specialist here at Charleston Middle School, and I have with me a special guest, Chris, from the public library, Charleston Public Library. Chris, would you like to tell us a little bit about Books and Bites?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. Like I said, I'm Chris Houchins. I'm the director at the Charleston Carnegie Public Library. And Books and Bites is a fun program that, I've been participating in for the last 2 years where we just, during a lunchtime, typically, if it was during what we call normal school year, we would just come and talk about some books while students would eat. Where they would come to the library there at CMS and we would just kind of go back and forth, talk about books. Each month we would have a different kind of topic and different variety of books that if you like, you don't like, you just kind of get to learn maybe some books you might not have known about before. So this week, since this week is officially actually Banned Books Week, we're actually going to be book talking some banned books or some challenged books. The first one, what do I want to start with? I'm going to start with this one here. It's The Face on the Milk Carton, which this is a story about Jamie Johnson, and she is 15 years old, and she's just going about, she's at school, having normal lunch, and then on a friend's milk carton, she sees a photo of a missing girl that she was kidnapped when she was 3 years old, and she looks at the photo and she realizes, that's her. That's a picture of her when she was 3 years old. So this is a story of her trying to figure out why is her picture on a milk carton saying she was kidnapped when she was 3? She's 15 now. So she starts kind of digging into her family, into her parents. She's starting to question, did her parents kidnap her when she was a child? So this is kind of the story of that mystery, trying to figure out who this girl on the milk carton is and is it her? And this is actually the first of a 5-part series. So if you like it, there's going to be 4 other books that talk about this, that follow this character around.
That does sound really good. I remember seeing that in my library some growing up, and it's definitely a book that got me kind of into mysteries, so that is a good one. I'm going to start with one of my favorite things, graphic novels. So this is Bone. It's book 1, so this is also a series book. And Bone is about these little creatures, they're bones, and there are 3 of them, and they get kicked out of Boneville, and they through a series of events get separated out while they're trying to find their way back to Boneville, and they kind of meet these different creatures and end up in this weird little valley, and you realize near the end that there is one of them is kind of being sought after, and it's kind of a weird little story, but it's really good and kind of captivating, and I've only read the first one, but I'm really interested to see how the rest of it goes. So if you like things that are really kind of offbeat and books that have really weird characters in them, I think you'll really like Bone.
Oh, I also love graphic novels. In fact, I'll do my graphic novel next. My graphic novel is Persepolis. This is actually, it's a graphic novel, but it's also nonfiction. It's actually a memoir from the author that when she was 10 in 1980, she was living in Iran, right when the Islamic Revolution started. And this is kind of the story of what the impact of war and religious extremism had on the people of Iran and what it was like to live during this war. At one point they take a family trip to Europe, and when they come back, everything is decimated, that their home is almost bombed out. It's just this really impactful story, and this is also the first of 2, I believe, that she has a second one. But this is just kind of that story of what it's like to grow up during such a tumultuous time in the middle of a war, in the middle of a religious revolution that happened in Iran in the 80s.
That is a really good one. I love it. And it's like a true story. It's her memoir, which is really cool. So I'm going to change a little bit and go to Paper Towns by John Green. John Green writes a ton of really good young adult books. And Paper Towns is really cool. So the title references this kind of thing on maps that happens where this town is put on a map as kind of like a copyright thing. So that way cartographers know that like if somebody's copied their work, because this town doesn't really exist. And there are these two characters, Quentin and Margot, who grew up together and were best friends and would go on all these adventures. But as they got older, kind of grew apart, as sometimes happens. And one evening, Margot comes to Quentin, or Q as he's called, and tells him she needs his help on an adventure. She wants to get back at her boyfriend and her previous best friend who her boyfriend cheated on her with. And so he kind of goes with her, but then after their adventure, Margot disappears, which isn't the first time this happens. She does this, but usually she shows back up. This time, Margot does not show back up. And so Q decides, like, she has left these clues for him to find her. And so he gets some of his friends and her other best friend together to follow these clues that lead to Agloe, New York, which is a paper town, a town that apparently does not really exist. So it's their journey and kind of the story of all of their friendship. And so it's a really interesting read. There's also a movie, so if you like books that have also been turned into movies so you can see the differences, I would recommend checking out Paper Towns.
That sounds great. The next one I'm going to do is the version I have is actually an audiobook. It's George Orwell's 1984. And 1984, for those not familiar with the files, that Winston Smith is our main character, and he lives in what's called Airstrip 1, which is actually what used to be called Great Britain, because they live in a totalitarian super state called Oceania that's ruled by the party, and the party is ruled by Big Brother. So it feels very over the top, but it's kind of where all those terms kind of originated from, that George Orwell kind of started this kind of dystopian novel writing for a large part of this kind of Big Brother state, because Big Brother and the party employ what's called as the thought police, and they make sure everybody stays in line with the party, that they prosecute individuality and independent thinking. And so we're in this really dark place with Winston Smith, who is a loyal party member, except he doesn't really want to be. He doesn't like the party. He doesn't like the way things are, and he wants to rebel. And he actually starts dating a coworker that he's not supposed to. There's not supposed to have that happen in the party. So he starts kind of even remembering what Great Britain was like before all of this happened, before Oceania, before Big Brother. And it's this kind of story of rebelling against this totalitarian state. It's a great dystopian novel that kind of is so many things as far as the world. It almost feels like George Orwell kind of predicted this kind of Big Brother things that we see now with technology and everything that everybody's worried about. So it's a really interesting read. And like I said, our version is actually the audiobook, which audiobooks do count as reading for all those out there.
I do love audiobooks. They're some of my other favorite things besides graphic novels. So my next one is like a bit of a short story collection, I guess you could call it. It's Scary Stories 3. So there are more tales to chill your bones. So there's a kind of 1-page, 2-page kind of folk tales that are on the scarier end. There's a whole kind of collection of them. There's scary stories you can tell in the dark, more scary stories, and then this third one. And so Alvin Schwartz, he collects a bunch of folklore, so stories that have been told over and over again for hundreds and thousands of years over time together, and they're all kind of creepy, and some of them are things that people have sworn have actually happened, and some of them are just kind of classic scary stories that you might have heard growing up. So it's a great time for getting into kind of our spooky season here with October starting and Halloween coming.
Oh yeah, it's a great time for some spooky stories. The last one I have is Beyond Magenta, Transgender Teens Speak Out. And this is actually a nonfiction. It talks about 6 different transgender teens and kind of has interviews with them, their family, some photos, and just kind of goes through each individual story of what it was like discovering who they are and who they should be. It's a really impactful story because it gets really in, into what their experiences actually were like, whether it was being accepted, being discriminated against, having their families kick them out because they're just trying to be who they're supposed to be. And I think it's a really powerful nonfiction that it does kind of read like short stories since it's 6 individuals that are broken up into each chapter. Um, but I'm actually going to finish book talking this one there's a poem from one of the individuals, Luke, who really tried to use poetry and theater to help adapt to who he was supposed to be. And this poem is, "They told me no. Said, what are you? Said you gotta choose. Said pink or blue. And I said, I'm a real nice color of magenta." I just think that it's really a great poem because you don't have to be just pink or blue. You be who you are. And this book just helps kind of show each individual's way to find that out.
Oh, that is really nice. I'll have to put that on my reading list. It sounds really good. So my last book is by one of my favorite authors, Jason Reynolds, and also with Brenda and Kylie. It's called All American Boys. And this was written in 2015, but is still a pretty timely book. So it goes between 2 characters' perspectives, Rashad and Quinn. And it is about an incident that happens to Rashad where he ends up being beaten by a police officer. And Quinn is a witness to it. He's one of the only witnesses of it, along with some security footage. And so Quinn is struggling with trying to understand like what he saw and what has happened, and there's a lot of divisiveness within the town and then nationally about what has happened to Rashad, and so it kind of alternates between their 2 perspectives going on. It's really kind of fast-paced and really kind of pulls you in and just pulls you along with it. So if you like things that kind of move quickly, stories that really kind of make you barrel through it and don't want to put down, I would definitely recommend All American Boys to pick up and read. So thank you for joining us, both those of you watching and Chris. Thanks for agreeing to do this with us and sharing those books.
Yeah, it's been great. I love doing Books and Bikes. I'm glad we were able to do it, even though it's virtual. I'll be looking forward to continuing Books and Bites. I think we're doing horror next month.
Yeah.
So that'll be really fun. But the one thing that, these are all have been banned or challenged books across the country. But the main thing with reading or wanting to read a banned or challenged book is it's up to you as the reader. If you're uncomfortable with one of these books, don't read it. That's one of the things that it's the freedom to choose. You can choose to read it or you can choose not to read it. So everything that we book talked here is kind of your choice, but you should also, depending on how old you are, you might want to ask your parents their opinions on what you're reading. We're not necessarily trying to get everybody in trouble here, but we want everybody to have the freedom to choose, but you also have to choose if you're uncomfortable with a topic, you don't have to read it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And also remember, if you start reading a book and decide that it's not for you, it's okay to stop reading it and return it to the library or give it back to a person you borrowed or just set it aside. And that's totally okay too.
Absolutely. I mean, there's too many books to read out there to read books you're not interested in.
Exactly.
There's always a different book out there. I personally set like a limit. If 40, 50 pages, if I'm not into the story, I'm moving on. Just, there's too much to read. So that's a great idea too.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see you next month in October. So thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.